to this situation involving USC and Colorado, which that game was shaping up as the most important to be played in the Pac-12 South. We thought it might be USC, Arizona State. Then we thought it might be USC and Utah. But Colorado's come out of the gate at 3-0, 2 of those wins in the Pac-12. They ended up finding a game out of conference against San Diego State and won 20-10. All right, now we get to a tiebreaker situation in which we've got USC, potentially, everybody play along with us. Everybody's got to win the games or split the games. But let's say USC takes care of business against Washington State, and then they've got the traditional end-of-year matchup coming up with UCLA on December 12th. So USC would stand at 5-0. Colorado would stand, I believe, at 6-0, but 5 of those wins in the Pac-12. The non-conference game doesn't factor in to the conference standing. So we've got 2 5-0 teams that didn't play each other. So who makes it to the Pac-12 championship game? Matt just looked this up. And Matt, I'll let you run it down for us.
So everyone knows with division tiebreakers, the usual thing is the head-to-head matchups. If a team, if a team is tied, then the first thing you go with is head-to-head, correct? So that's the usual for the tiebreakers. However, in this circumstance, USC and Colorado don't play each other this year. So that was, that game is gone. So that's a division game gone. So now you move down for a 2-team tie. You move down to the next tiebreaker, which is record in games played within the division. Well, in this hypothetical reason, let's say not Washington, but let's say USC and Colorado both run the table. They will be undefeated in the division. So now you move down to the next one, which is record against the next highest placed team in the division, based on records in all games played within conference. Well, they would have the same record pretty much. So now we move to the fourth, which is record in common conference games, will be the same. So now you've gone through 4 scenarios where Colorado and USC matches each other. Now, I could be wrong. I have to extensively look at those scenarios, but USC and Colorado would match each other. Now you go to the 5th one, the 5th tiebreaker, which is team with the highest college football playoff ranking. Well, in this scenario, right now, USC is 20th. If USC wins out, USC would move up in the college football playoff standings. I'm sure if Colorado wins out, Colorado would enter the college football playoff standing eventually. We think eventually they'll end up in there. It's hard to keep a 5-0 to keep out a 5-0 team out of the college football playoff ranking. So we believe Colorado would get in there. In that case, this would favor the Trojans because the Trojans how the way they would play will probably move up. If not, will probably slightly move up. We've seen how this been going. If anything, I don't foresee the College Football Playoff Committee bypassing Colorado. Now, if Colorado looks way more impressive than USC, then anything's possible there. But I think this is where it would go to the USC because USC right now, as it stands, is I believe one of only 3 teams in the Pac-12 that's ranked in the college football playoff rankings. So they would go to the Pac-12 championship game based off of that alone. Now, it could change because Colorado could bypass USC if that happens, and Colorado could end up being in the Pac-12 championship game, and USC could be left out. So either way, it's looking like it's going to that 5th tiebreaker. And of course, you have everything else, which is winning percentage of each tied team and with conference opponents, highest rankings by Sports Source Analytics, and then the very last one you have is a good old-fashioned coin toss.
The coin toss might be favorable in my estimation as opposed to the college football playoff ranking. I think it's pretty much just as valid. So I've got respect, a certain high level of respect for everybody in that room. There are 13 people. They know college football. I am not, this is not a shot at them. This is a shot at the process and the system. So we have two teams that play in the same division. They didn't play each other. Everything that Matt just ran down in regards to their undefeated team. So everything is going to tie. Every tiebreaker is going to be exactly the same because they're undefeated. This isn't like the NFL tiebreaker system when two teams are 12-4 and you can go to all sorts of common opponents because there have been losses that there's going to be a tie broken. There aren't going to be ties broken because everybody's undefeated involved in the process. So we're looking at a Colorado team that beat UCLA by 6. They beat Stanford by 3. They beat San Diego State. Of course, that's a non-conference game, by 10. We've got USC with a 1-point win against Arizona State, a close win by 4 against Arizona, a pretty convincing but 1 touchdown win, 2 touchdown wins. What was the final score of that game? 24-17 against Utah? Something in that range. So regardless,
I believe it was 30. Hold on, I believe it was 31 to 17.
Yeah, regardless, you really can't make a distinguishment between their performances at this point. So we're going to have a committee, a college football playoff selection committee, that there's no question that they favor USC going into the season. And we see this all throughout the college football playoff rankings, that if they favor and have a perception of a particular team going into it, then there has to be a lot of work done by other teams to supersede that. They obviously weren't giving Colorado much consideration, if any, early until Colorado started winning games, and they're still not in the playoff rankings at 3-0. So USC is going to have to be completely outplayed by Colorado, which is not objective or fair. The only way to end this under these circumstances where they don't play and nobody's losing a game under our scenario, to try to differentiate these two teams is try to put it to some type of statistical measurement of point differential and dominance of play against very similar opponents. So they're playing similar opponents, not necessarily the same opponents, because there have been so many cancellations, but they play in the same conference. So the opponents are similar. And I think it should go to some type of metric evaluation of point differential that's more objective. Okay.
And I agree with that, honestly, because if you remember, I believe it was back in 2009, if I'm not mistaken. It was either 2009 or it was 2010. It was one of the two. I think it was 2009. And you had the Oklahoma and Texas debate in the Big 12, back when the Big 12 had the North and South division. And Texas, I believe the argument was Texas defeated Oklahoma by 10 on a neutral field in the Red River Shootout. However, I believe Oklahoma at one point was ahead of Texas, and there was all this debate, and then Texas ended up bypassing Oklahoma in the BCS standings, and Texas went on to the Big 12 title game, and they played Nebraska in a thrilling game. I believe that it was somewhat of the same scenario that happened around that time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that is the scenario. It was a 45-35 Oklahoma win. However, Texas went to the national championship game.
Yes. So
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So
don't get me started on the BCS. I could give you like 17 examples of how the BCS did not work and was complete fraud. That was one of them. And that's not even high on the list. But yeah, when you've got two teams that play in the same conference, so basically they played the same schedule. They both go 11-1, and they played each other.
Right.
And your system sends the team that lost the game to the conference championship game, and therefore the BCS championship game.
But a metric, like you said, a metric of some sort would end up being ideal in this situation. But at the same time, this is a situation we honestly haven't seen. I don't think we've ever seen where we've had two teams in the same division in college football not play each other and we got to figure out how to determine how one of them go and play for a Pac-12 championship. So
absolutely, because that's the obvious tiebreaker, is that everyone in every division in college football plays each other.
exactly.
And they do everything they possibly can if there's some kind of issue with a cancellation to just make up the game, because we had never been through a pandemic where if there was a hurricane or something that would cancel a game, they just make it up. And obviously that would be the highest priority game to be played. Yeah, the only other consideration I could make here, Matt, is that we've got to, and this isn't Colorado's fault, but one of their wins is out of conference. So right now, Colorado's only 2-0 in the Pac-12, USC's 3-0, and they're both playing 2 conference games to conclude the season. So Colorado's going to be 4-0 in the Pac-12, and USC is going to be 5-0.
Exactly, and that's going to be a thing. And if we're factoring that, which I think that might end up being a factor, if that's being factored into it, then honestly, you could say USC, all USC has to do is win out and they go based off of that alone. And we don't go to the college football playoff ranking or anything like that.
There you have it. Matt Lowry from Conquest Chronicles talking USC football. The Trojans take on Washington State Sunday night, 4:30 local time and 7:30 on the East Coast. Matt, we appreciate you stopping by as always.
Thank you. I enjoy being on.